I've tried to make this video like 10 times, but broth versus stock, what's going on with that? This video is one that I've been tagged in more than any time I've been tagged in my entire life. And honestly, I am really thrilled because this creator genuinely seems like she's curious about this question. And I have to say, in this social media poisoned world, a little curiosity really invigorates me. So I might have to make 2 extremely long videos in order to cover all of this. So be patient with me as we go into part 1, the things she definitely got right in that video. One of the things that she definitely got right in that video is the USDA definition of broth/stock. So broth and stock are interchangeable terms according to the USDA. In addition to that, broth/stock is defined by a 135:1 moisture protein ratio and 67:1 moisture protein ratio for condensed items. So if you see something that says like condensed, that's what that means. Which leads us into the more overarching thing, aka part 2. If you make chicken stock at home and it's solid, and all the chicken stock at the store is liquid, is it really just chicken flavored water? Like, are they really scamming us? Well, let's take that, rewind it back, and talk about how to make chicken stock at home. When you make chicken stock at home, you are boiling chicken bones. Chicken bones contain collagen, and when you heat up collagen, it goes through a partial hydrolysis to turn into what? Gelatin. So, gelatin is a hydrocolloid that will sort of set at 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's like making Jello at home. When you make Jello, you heat it up and then you cool it, and then it basically turns into this yummy, wiggly gel. But gelatin is a thermoreversible gel, which essentially means that after a certain temperature, it's liquid, and then at a certain temperature, it's solid. So whether you're using Jello or chicken stock, when it's in that wiggly state, if you bring it back up and heat it back up, the gelatin will turn liquid again. So the gelatin will turn solid when cooled and will turn liquid when heated. But this begs a huge question. If the difference between the stock in the store and the stock you make at home is gelatin, then why don't companies just add powdered gelatin to this? I mean, it would be like very easy to artificially thicken something, like in a food additive sense. You don't even need chicken bones. You could just get a type of powdered gelatin. And if you were trying to make a plant-based alternative, you could use a different type of thermoreversible gel like agar. So if there are cheap, feasible solutions to thicken the broth to be more stock-like, why isn't that the case? Like, why does it feel like it's not mimicking stock at all? Now, I've never worked in a broth making facility, but I think there's a lot of reasons why boxed broth is more on the liquidy side. For the most part, packaged broths are shelf stable, and the packaging impacts a lot of this. I'm gonna do a little visual demonstration. Have you ever gone to the grocery store and seen almond milk or dairy packaged in containers like this and thought, why? Like, wouldn't it go bad because it's sitting on the shelf? Well, it's because boxes like these have gone through something called ultra high temperature processing, or UHT for short. So sometimes they're even labeled on the box, but UHT processing typically means you heat something up to a very high temperature for a short amount of time, typically around 135 Celsius or 275 Fahrenheit for a few seconds. It's kind of like a different pasteurization. The goal of this process is to eliminate harmful bacteria while preserving the integrity of the product. Then it goes through another process called aseptic packaging. You can see even on this one, it states that it's been aseptically packaged, which is a way to essentially safely package something to make it shelf stable, save money on refrigeration costs, preserve product integrity for much longer, and overall just like helps to keep the product integrity for a much longer amount of time. So again, why don't we just make an aseptically packaged, ultra high temperature treated versions of chicken broth that contains gelatin? Why can't we just add gelatin to this to mimic the real texture of chicken stock? This is where it gets tricky. Let's go back to our Jello example. When you make Jello at home, how do you get it? You get it in a box like this, and you just heat it up and make it yourself. But where is pre-made Jello found? In the refrigerated section, right? This is because it is a high moisture item and you need temperature control to make sure that it doesn't have any bacteria or mold. You see, because it's already turned into Jello, there is a higher level of water activity, which means that microbes are easily able to grow. This means that if there was a chicken broth with gelatin, it would have to be a refrigerated item. In addition to that, even if aseptic packaging and UHT were applied to a chicken broth that contained gelatin, you would have to consider things like usability and integrity. For usability, you have to think, most people are very used to their broth being liquid because they add it to not just soups, but things like pasta, casseroles, sauces, etc. Stock would come out chunky and gloopy, and you wouldn't be able to measure it as well for a particular recipe. And in terms of integrity, gelatin, when you heat it up to this ultra high temperature processing temperature for a few seconds, which is much higher than boiling temperature, the texture and flavor would be greatly compromised because the gelatin strength at that temperature would rapidly decline and could even burn. So then you're ending up with a product that is not even what something that someone would want. Plus, you can find chicken broths that do contain gelatin, but guess what? They're in powdered form. So you have to rehydrate and reconstitute them in order to make that gel, just like Jell-O. So if that's the case, then how come there aren't any refrigerated chicken stocks that have that texture? Well, I mean, I think the biggest one that we know the answer to is cost. I know there is a small section in the grocery store for some like pre-prepared refrigerated soups, but for the most part, refrigeration costs a lot of money. Plus, you can find something like a refrigerated gelatinized chicken broth in a specialty market like Erewhon, but if you already have the chicken bones, you might as well just eliminate some food waste and make it at home for free. This is why companies use spray-dried forms of chicken broth to basically create this broth so that it can be rehydrated. It's not necessarily a flavor of chicken, depending on what you buy. It's more like a rehydrated item that was already broth-like, kind of like when you go camping and reconstitute something with water. I'm probably going to make a part 2 to this, talking about the regulatory background of why this happens, because that is a doozy in and of itself. But let's pivot to part 3, which is the third-party manufacturer company Symrise, or that German European country that she mentioned that makes a lot of the broth ingredients. The question here is, are third-party manufacturers common in the food industry? The answer is yes. The number one thing people complain about when it comes to pricing is food. It's about the eggs. It's about the groceries. No one likes paying a lot of money for food, especially in the United States. And food manufacturing is a high investment with very low cost margins. It really sucks. So if you're a food manufacturer and you don't have a factory with all of this equipment that can handle one thing, are you going to either A, buy millions of dollars of real estate and equipment and hire people to make this in-house, or B, become a customer to a completely different food company who already has all that stuff set up already, and you can maintain a promised business relationship of good and ample supply? Psst, the answer is usually B. Plus, we have to consider now that the amount of chicken that we're eating has exponentially exploded just in the past 30 years. So demand for chickens is up, but there's only so many chickens that can get made. So to meet that demand, that's why they lean on something like a third-party manufacturer that can provide more efficiently made, spray-dried chicken stock. It's more than just chicken-flavored water. It's actually broth that is spray-dried, so it's not an artificial flavor. Again, most of the time, read the label because the label is correct. And every company is a little bit different in the way that they do things. The last thing I'll talk about in this part 1 video is which is part 4, how come when we contact publicists, all they talk about is how good the product is and nothing else? The first answer is that if you're asking a publicist about if there's a third-party manufacturer that they use, most of the time they're going to keep that private because third-party manufacturers are their treasured customers. They don't want to tell someone what supplier they're using because what if they're a competitor? I've worked at food companies before where we had to shred all of our formulation documents because we were scared someone was going to dumpster dive for them. Food company and food trade secrets are very intense and very kept under lock and key. But the second reason, and I think the biggest reason why the publicist might not tell her about all this information about about stock versus broth, is they probably don't even know themselves. A lot of publicists are just folks who work at the company but have never interacted with the product or been in the manufacturing facility. And the nuance to this is that this is a huge turning of tides when it comes to transparency for food companies. Transparency is something that the food industry has been greatly lacking over the past 40 years, and it's something that consumers have been demanding. I literally have a degree in this stuff, and you shouldn't have to have a degree to understand what's going on. But again, it's hard to explain all this stuff just because of how complex regulations, margins, having to keep food cheap so people don't get mad, all that kind of stuff. Okay, I'm gonna make a part 2, I promise, but I'm obsessed with this topic.